The views expressed on the following broadcasts do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT, Take 12 Radio, or our affiliates. The opinions on this show should not be considered as medical, psychological, or professional advice and are those of the host, co-host, and guest. Take 12 Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
One day at a time with its failures and fears, with portion of pain and burden of care, we must meet.
Welcome to Walking Through the Language of the Heart, a journey into the grapevine writings of Alcoholics Anonymous co-founder Bill W. And now, here are your co-hosts, Chris S. and the Monty Man.
Well, come on in, have a seat, or stand if you like. And get ready for another great show, another great episode of Walking Through the Language of the Heart with our good friend Chris S. Hey, Chris.
What's going on, Monty?
It is a beautifully wet and rainy day here in Oregon. I think, however, that the rain, I think we have enough. I think California could use it right now. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, Monty, my sponsor keeps his horses at the Will Rogers Estate. That's where he does most of his work, and it's ashes now. You know, I feel terrible for him, Brad. You know Brad, but man, oh man, I really feel for the people in between Santa Monica and Malibu right now.
Yep. It wasn't but a couple of months ago I was down there, and I was where Santa Monica Boulevard meets the jetty there, the boardwalk and all, is where I went into a blackout and woke up 2 weeks later in Oregon. That was the beginning of my story.
Whoa!
And so I had not been to that location for 27 years. I hadn't been there, and so I was doing some small groups at the Salvation Army in Long Beach. And so me and one of my co-hosts from Monday's show and a couple of guys, they said, hey, you want to go down and see where the whole thing started for you? I said, man, that'd be awesome. So we went down there, and I mean, memories came flooding through. Not real good ones, mind you.
Yeah.
But I started tearing up because I was like, wow, this is where my story really started. Was here.
Turning point, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a turning point. And then I see the pictures of the fires and the flames, hovering over the boardwalk, and I'm just like, oh man. So our prayers go out.
You know, the Pacific Coast Highway that goes, right up the coast from Santa Monica up toward Malibu.
Yes.
There's not a house left on it.
I know.
In the Pacific Palisades. Unbelievable.
And the great what do you call the monks? The Franciscan monks have a tremendous retreat center up there.
I know. I've been there. I've done retreats there. Yeah.
That's where Came to Believe does their Malibu retreats every year.
That's where the Hermosa Beach Men's Stag does their retreat, and I've been up there for that one.
So I don't know if it's there yet, but one can only wish.
Let's hope not.
All right, what are we doing this week, buddy?
We're in the middle of the memorial articles. That's kind of at the end of this book. We're going to come to the close of this particular series of episodes soon, Monty. But tonight we're on page 360 of the book Language of the Heart, and we're going to be talking about Bill Dotson. We're going to be talking about the man on the bed. You've seen the Norman Rockwell-esque painting of Bill and Bob, hovering over the man on the bed, right? That's where this iconic visual kind of comes from. They when they went to work helping other alcoholics, Bill Dotson was one of their first victims, and certainly the first victim to get and to stay sober.
Now, I have not been to the New York office, but is it true there's like a stained glass version of that hanging somewhere? Is it New York or?
It's been so many years.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you, but I've seen pictures of the stained glass. I'm sure
Yeah.
someone has done it. Yeah.
Yeah. What an awesome painting.
All right, this is called "He Kept the Faith," and it's from November 1954. So poor Bill, Dr. Bob, Ann Smith, Bill Dotson, all around 1950 to 54. The first people in this organization are dying on him.
Yeah.
The poor guy. Anyway, Bill D, AA number 3, died in Akron Friday night, September 17th, 1954. That is, people say he died, but he really didn't. His spirit and works are today alive in the hearts of uncounted AAs, and who can doubt that Bill already dwells in one of the many mansions in the great beyond. 19 years ago last summer, Dr. Bob and I saw him for the first time. Bill lay on his hospital bed and looked at us in wonder. 2 days before this, Dr. Bob had said to me, "If you and I are going to stay sober, we'd better get busy." Straight away, Bob called Akron City Hospital and asked for the nurse on the receiving ward. He explained that he and a man from New York had a cure for alcoholism. Did she have an alcoholic customer on whom it could be tried? Knowing Bob of old, she jokingly replied, "Well, doctor, I suppose you've already tried it on yourself." Yeah, I bet. So, yes, she did have a customer, a dandy. He just arrived in DT's, had blackened the eyes of 2 nurses, and now they had him strapped down tight. Would this one do? After prescribing medicines, Dr. Bob ordered, "Put him in a private room. We'll be down as soon as he clears up." This is back when they could restrain you. It's really, really difficult for medical facilities to restrain people like that. There has to be a real official
Yeah.
action for you to be able to do that in hospitals now. We found we had a tough customer in Bill. According to the nurse, he had been a well-known attorney in Akron and a city councilman. But he had landed in the Akron City Hospital 4 times in the last 6 months. Following each release, he got drunk even before he could get home. Monty, I've known people who, on the way home from treatment, get drunk. You know what I mean? I mean that's how powerless. That's how powerless some people can get. There's a scale of powerlessness. That's one of the most misunderstood things in alcoholism. You'll get like a high bottom alcoholic who comes into AA and he makes coffee for 3 months and never does another thing, just goes to 1 or 2 meetings a week for 10, 20, 30 years. And he's mystified when people really dig into this thing and start doing all these steps and all the service commitments. He thinks that they're fanatics or something because he didn't need to do it. Right. Well, it's because his level of powerlessness is a lot different than the person who has to dig in deep. You know what I mean?
Do we not tend to think and kind of make a judgment call with a guy like that? We have a tendency to think, well, maybe he's not really an alcoholic, but he might be, right?
Oh, I've really stopped, unless I'm sponsoring you and I'm asking you a whole series of really telling questions and I'm qualifying you. I don't judge in the rooms. Yeah. I'll tell you a story. I probably told this before, but I like the way I tell it, so I'm going to tell it again. There was a guy that I started sponsoring, and for 10 years he was a heroin addict. He wasn't drinking. He was a heroin addict. And when he finally got sober and he finally was doing a fifth step with me, what I realized was in the 70s, he was an alcoholic, drinking alcoholically, and he was shutting down his liver and his pancreas. And the doctor said, "Listen, you are going to die if you keep putting alcohol in your system." So he started substituting heroin. Now, heroin will take care of what you need to have
Sure.
taken care of. You know what I mean? And so he didn't drink a drop in the 80s, but he came into Alcoholics Anonymous. And a lot of people were putting a label on him like, oh, he's a junkie, he's a drug addict, rah, 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 right? But when I finally was able to dig through his story, he had alcoholism. And he was treating alcoholism with like 12 bags of heroin a day. You know what I mean? So how do I know what I don't know?
Right.
And God forbid I make the wrong call and tell somebody, you don't belong here. God forbid I do that. You know. So
right. Amen. Yeah.
So I'm, and I'm also very liberal as concerning the fellowship. I'm not somebody that's going to complain about much. You know what I mean? As far as people qualifications or stuff.
I was that guy years ago. I was that guy. I don't like that guy. Yeah, he's a control freak. He's a narcissist, man. I think back at that. I think I've told you before my little Girl Scout hut AA meeting that we borrowed from the Girl Scouts, little tiny shack thing, right? And I'm coming in there, and the first night I'm there, I'm thinking, oh man, these guys need to read the 12 and 12. They need to follow these traditions, by golly, by George, or this thing's going to fold. I really believe that. That thing was doing just fine before I got there.
Yeah.
And just fine after I left there.
Oh man, and listen, I think that's the evangelical period, right? And I truly believe if you don't go through that, you've missed something. I truly think it's part of our buying into this society is to get really serious about it until we realize there's nothing really to be serious about except carrying a message of depth and weight.
We grow up.
We mature. Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. So here we were talking to Bill, the first man on the bed. We told him about our drinking. We hammered it into him that alcoholism was an obsession of the mind coupled to an allergy of the body. Now, I want to emphasize this. When we're doing a 12-step call, when we're talking to somebody about their alcoholism, and maybe because it's so difficult to understand, I really hammer home the obsession of the mind and the allergy of the body. I do because that is the totality of powerlessness.
Sure.
If you can't control it when it's in your body, and you can't keep it from going in your body, that's a complete powerlessness. If you could just not drink, it'd be fine. But that's an aspect of alcoholism that no matter how much we want, no matter what the drive we have, no matter the reasons, we can't. And
right.
so they're hammering this home, Bill and Bob. I wish I had a video of it.
So I really want to interject something here because
sure.
I just want to see your opinion. As many times as I've read the big book, I always think, I wonder, because there's a lot of yets in there. Well, we haven't discovered this yet. This hasn't happened yet. There's more to come, maybe someday, talking about doctors and things like that, right? And so if that's the case, if they really believe that, then it's probably true that we may progress in the medical field, at least in our knowledge, and maybe not in the state of cured, but definitely in our knowledge. And one of the things that I may be wrong about this, but I used to be, well, I still am. You need to check two boxes. If I'm working with somebody, that's the two boxes I want to check. When you drink, do you have little or no control over how much you drink or how often? And when you're sober, can you stay that way? However, let me see what you think about this. Can a person who is not alcoholic drink alcohol and have such a euphoric experience that they want to drink more and they have little or no control over how much they drink from that point on in that evening or maybe even that week and not be alcoholic.
Yes, I truly believe that. I drank with somebody. This guy Robbie, he was my partner the last 2 years of my drinking. He was my electrician partner. We worked together, and when we went out drinking, we both got blackout drunk. But
Right.
he married this young lady who didn't want him going out and getting blackout drunk all the time, and so guess what? He would quit drinking for long amounts of time, and he wouldn't go into like a multi-day thing. He would get really drunk, wake up in the morning, have a hangover, and be relatively normal for
Sure.
months and months and months after that until I showed up again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I would never consider him an alcoholic. Uh, does he have maybe the allergy? Yeah, but if you have the allergy and you don't have the obsession, you don't really have a problem
You're not
because
checking
you
both
just
boxes.
don't drink. Yeah, you
So
got to check both boxes.
I had a disagreement with somebody on our social media page for Take 12 Radio, and they said, well, and they quoted the doctor's opinion where it says, this never happens in the normal temperate drinker. And I said, yeah, but I think we've learned some things since then. And I think it does happen in the normal temperate drinker, at least that box. I don't think the obsession of the mind, which can happen when you're stone cold sober, the relationship that I have with alcohol, with it not being in my body, that's the ticket. That's the one where I go, okay, after 2 years of sobriety, I'm standing in front of the ATM machine and I'm talking myself into taking out, I'll just take $20 out. Well, maybe 60. Well, I'm only going to buy a 6-pack. Well, maybe I'll buy a 12-pack. Stone cold sober. No booze, no drugs, not even any tobacco for 2 years, Chris. And I'm thinking like that. The normal temperate drinker doesn't think that way. They
No.
just do not. But can they lose control over how much they drink because of the euphoria of drinking? Sure.
Let's call them the hard drinker instead of
Right.
the temperate drinker. Is the person who has a cordial, after dessert
pork,
or something,
little
right?
pork.
Right. But there's hard drinkers and heavy drinkers who are not alcoholic, and they can look just like us when they're drinking.
Yes.
They can tip the tables over at the wedding. They can do all that stuff. But the time and the place comes, to separate, they separate. They can separate on their own unaided will.
Yeah.
And I can't. And that's really what puts me in the alcoholic category.
It's how we think. What's our relationship in our thinking towards alcohol when we don't have any in us?
Yeah.
That's what I want to know when I'm working with somebody.
Yeah.
You know.
Because sobriety's not acceptable. In an unrecovered state, sobriety's not acceptable to me. I'm good. The time and the place is going to come where I'm going to need the anesthesia because this is just too much.
Yeah.
and it may be conscious, it may be unconscious, I may be thinking, I may be not thinking, but alcohol's going back in my body. The only thing I can say is I've had that experience 12,000 times. You know what I mean? And I don't need to understand it to the depths of a psychoanalytical study. I just need to know that I need something to stop me from doing that.
Sure.
I need a power.
Yes,
and the power is going to have to be greater than me because I can't do it. And the power they discovered in these early days was God, and they were unapologetic about it.
Yeah.
Like I'm telling you, the man on the bed was getting it. Both barrels here. I'm sure.
Well,
let's see what it has to say here.
Excellent.
The obsession, we explained, condemned the alcoholic to drink against his will. And the allergy, if he went on drinking, could positively guarantee his insanity or death. That's really well put. I'm going to highlight that paragraph. How to unhook that fatal compulsion, how to restore the alcoholic to sanity was, of course, the problem. Bill is so great with his words. You know how many times I have tried to say this, and I've said it 50,000 different ways, and I'm looking at this paragraph, and it's perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So So hearing this bad news, Bill's swollen eyes opened wide. Then we took the hopeful tack. We told him what we had done, how we got honest with ourselves as never before, how we had talked our problems out with each other in confidence, how we tried to make amends for harms done others, how we had then been miraculously released from the desire to drink as soon as we had humbly asked God, as we understood him, for guidance and protection. Wow. Wow.
There it is. There it is. Right
Yeah,
there.
yeah. The problem and the solution in 2 paragraphs. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. Bill didn't seem too impressed. Looking sadder than ever, he wearily ventured, "Well, this is wonderful for you fellows, but can't be for me. My case is so terrible that I'm scared to go out of this hospital at all. You don't have to sell me religion either. I was at one time a deacon in the church, and I still believe in God, but I guess he doesn't believe much in me." Then Dr. Bob said, "Well, Bill, maybe you'll feel better tomorrow. Wouldn't you like to see us again?" "Sure I would," replied Bill. "Maybe it won't do any good, but I'd like to see you both anyhow. You certainly know what you were talking about." Looking in the next day, we found Bill with his wife, Henrietta. Eagerly, he pointed to us, saying, "These are the fellows I told you about. They are the ones who understand." Bill then related how he had lain awake nearly all night. Down in the pit of depression, new hope had somehow been born. The thought flashed through his mind, if they can do it, I can do it. Over and over he said this to himself. Finally, out of this hope there burst conviction. Now he was sure. Then came a great joy. At length peace stole over him, and he slept. Before our visit was over, Bill suddenly turned to his wife and said, "Go fetch my clothes, dear. We're going to get up and get out of here." Bill D. walked out of that hospital a free man, never to drink again. AA's #1 group dates from that very day. The force of the great example that Bill set in our pioneering time will last as long as AA itself. Bill kept the faith. What more could we say? Wow, that has some great writing in it, Monty, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I'm just like, I'm going to get in trouble. I love this. Sorry, Clarence. Yours wasn't the first meeting.
Yeah, Bill gets to claim it. So when Bill says AA started, he's talking about the people. When Clarence says AA started, he says the sign on the door. Yeah, it's two different things.
Yeah.
I believe our society started, when Bill and Bob stayed sober.
Yeah, God,
our society
the
started.
2 pieces together right then. That was when it started to gel. That's really when the spark was lit. What did every single time I hear the story of the Mayflower Hotel, every single time I hear the story about Bill walking by the bar going, "Man, those guys are having fun," and the phone booth thing and the miraculous thing that happened with Henrietta and the phone calls, it just. You can't make this stuff up. This is providence. No doubt about it. No doubt.
Yeah. It's an amazing story. The story that we come from. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna hold it sacred. The rest of my life. This story because through the generations of sober alcoholics land me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And thank God for all this stuff. So that's Bill Dotson. The next person, I got to admit, Monty, I don't know anything about. Dr. A. Weise Hammer. Maybe this is the guy Weisenhammer is named after.
Maybe. Weisenheimer? You're an old Weisenheimer?
Yeah, maybe. Let's see. All right, this is May 1957. This was written. This simple account of the passing of one of America's finest surgeons stirs memories that will always be bright in the annals of Alcoholics Anonymous. Dr. A. Weise Hammer was one of the best friends that AA will ever have. Several of Philadelphia's old-time members have written up the full story of Dr. Hammer and his benefactions. But here is the substance of what they had to say. So Fitz Mayo, there was a couple of the very first New York AAs that ended up down in Philadelphia because of business reasons or divorces or whatever. and they got to work. They got to work down there in Philadelphia. And Fitzmayo was sitting around while they were writing the big book. You know, he was in the room with Hank and Bill a lot, and then he'd get on the train and go back to Philadelphia. So there was some stuff going on, and I bet Fitz had something to do with finding this guy. Anyway. It was February 1940. Jim, a New York AA, had just moved to Philadelphia and was trying to get a local bookstore to carry the book. That would be Jimmy Burwell, I believe. Alcoholics Anonymous. The bookstore's manager protested that his customers could have no possible interest in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. As for himself, he couldn't care less. No, you got to carry this book. This is a great book. Overhearing this turn down, a lady standing nearby got into the act. She said she had sent Alcoholics Anonymous to her alcoholic nephew in Los Angeles. To the astonishment of the whole family, the problem boy had sobered up instantly and had stayed that way for some 3 months. This was unheard of. Nevertheless, the bookstore manager remained unimpressed. This is a really interesting story. This is the first edition of the big book, The Lone Endeavor, it was called. It was a story. It was a story about somebody that picked up the big book, got sober, started communicating with New York, and they were so happy that somebody was able to get sober just using the book. They had this guy. They had this guy come to New York. They had him jump on a train and come to New York. The problem was when he showed up in New York. Guess what, Monty?
Oh, he drank.
Drunker than a hoot owl.
Yeah.
So they had to take the story out of the book.
Oh no.
Anyway, but when Helen Hammer heard of Jim's attempt to start the group at Philadelphia, her delight was boundless. She immediately led Jim and one of his new prospects to her surgeon husband. Dr. Hammer, in all that he undertook, was a huge enthusiast. This full-blooded, ruddy-faced man had a zest for living which poured out of him right around the clock. And this joyous contagion he could spread to just about everybody he met. The moment he heard Jim's story about his AA good work for our society began at once. As we shall see, it was not confined to Philadelphia only. Dr. Hammer went to bat for us nationally at a time when AA had great need of this kind of good friend. And Bill is always extra impressed if you're like a surgeon or something. You know, I really think that was part of the reason he latched on to Dr. Bob with both hands. Here's what Dr. Hammer did. Opened his home to all AA members, secured the Philadelphia group its first meeting rooms, introduced us to Dr. Stouffer, another great friend-to-be, who was then chief psychiatrist at the Philadelphia General Hospital, secured us treatment and visiting privileges there, had AA speak before the County Medical Society, along with his good wife Helen, attended nearly every AA meeting for years, gave free medical and surgical aid to every AA who wanted it, visited other cities to talk about AA, and paid the expense of the Philadelphia members he took along. Offered to buy the Philadelphia group its first clubhouse, which had to be declined, saw that his friend Justice Curtis Bach, owner of the Saturday Evening Post, became interested in AA, and finally induced the judge to assign Jack Alexander to do the famous article in 1941 that made our fellowship a national institution. Holy mackerel! What this guy did? Why don't I know about this guy?
Isn't that interesting? It makes you wonder about some of the other things we don't know.
Man, you know, friends like that is why AA is on the map today.
Wow, that's amazing.
A surgeon doing all that. This is only an abbreviated list of Dr. Hammer's good works for our society. Doubtless hundreds of his benefactions will never be known, except to those individual sufferers to whom he was so notably kind. Then, too, I find it impossible to write about Dr. Hammer without the happy recollection of Dr. Dudley Saul, another noted Philadelphia physician who constantly vied with Dr. Hammer in good works for us drunks. To our intense astonishment, and always to our great benefit, these two great gentlemen fiercely competed with each other to figure out something bigger and better they could do for Alcoholics Anonymous. This is a great story in itself, which I'm going to tell one of these days. How could AA in its infancy ever have survived without friends such as these Philadelphia physicians who worked shoulder to shoulder with Dr. Tebow and Silkworth at New York? To Helen Hammer, I sent AA's deepest sympathy and gratitude, and I often wonder what her memories of our early days must be.
Amazing.
Wow. Wow.
That is
Wow.
Whew. See, this is the kind of stuff that I just had a guy the other day ask me to sponsor him, and 2 or 3 days later, yeah, I really don't think I'm ready to do this program. Sorry for wasting your time.
Wow.
And I was like, but when that happens, I think of things like this. I think of how much, not just sobriety, not just a relationship with God, but all the great jewels of this fellowship that a person misses out on, when they don't jump in with both feet. And our rooms are filled with people that have been going to meetings for decades, and they don't know any of this stuff.
No.
And it's just amazing. But when they do finally read it or hear about it, they're like, wow. You know what I mean? Just like we were about this one article.
It makes me enthusiastic. It increases my enthusiasm for all of this, all this stuff.
It's exciting.
Funny thing that it happened in one of our groups, Monty. This guy came in and he raised his hand and he stood up and he resigned from AA. He goes, I'm just here tonight to tell all of you I'm resigning. He didn't know. And I'm like, we go up to him after the meeting and we go, dude, nobody resigns here. All they do is slip away like greased weasels, and we don't see them anymore. They don't declare their resignation.
Right.
Oh man, funny.
Oh my goodness sake. Well, listen, do you think we have time for one more?
If you want to, it's a big one. It's not a long one. It's
not a long one.
It's a big one. Father Ed Dowling.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Okay, so there's a book out there, Monty, that I would recommend to anybody. It's called The Soul of Sponsorship. And what it is it's the letters between Bill Wilson and Father Ed Dowling. He considered him a spiritual sponsor. And it's an incredible bunch. They would write each other. Everybody wrote each other back then.
Yeah.
And it's some remarkable writings. Outside of AA and Alcoholics Anonymous literature, it's just communication between the two, and I can't recommend it enough. In it, Bill admits to Father Ed that he wrote he was instrumental in writing the 12 essays on the steps for the 12 steps and 12 traditions as bait, so that the 12 traditions would be bought. He knew that if he wrote a book called The 12 Traditions, nobody would buy it. But if he wrote about the 12 steps, it would fly off the shelves, and that's exactly what it did. So the important part of the 12 and 12 is the traditions, not the steps. Right. According to Bill, he just used that as bait.
And might I just say here that, bless your heart out there if you're chairing a big book study and you're taking people through the steps, not using the big book, but using the 12 and 12. Bless your little heart. But knock it off. That is not the directions for working the steps. It just isn't.
I didn't find out what bless your heart meant until I moved down south. When I moved down south, buddy, I found out what it meant. Right. Anyway, listen, we need every tool in the arsenal. We certainly do. But the 12 steps are the prerequisite for the 12 and 12 is the big book. Let's just put it that way.
Amen.
All right, to Father Ed. Father Ed was very, very important to Bill, and this is June 1960. So let's see what he has to say. Early Sunday morning, April 3rd, Father Ed Dowling died peacefully in his sleep. The place was Memphis, Tennessee. Cheerfully unmindful of his ebbing health, he had been visited one of his Cana groups, a favorite undertaking which he founded. Father Ed's Cana groups are dedicated under church auspices to the solution of difficult family problems through the practice of the AA's 12 steps. Never was there a gayer evening than in the hours before. He would have wanted to take his leave of us just that way. This was one of the most gentle souls and finest friends we AAs may ever know. He left a heritage of inspiration and grace, which will be with us always. Father Ed had planned to be at our 1960 Long Beach convention come July. This prospect, now to be unfulfilled, brings a moving recollection of his appearance at AA's St. Louis International Convention in 1955. It seems altogether fitting that I repeat the introduction I then made of him, together with an account of the unforgettable impression he left upon me the very first time we met, a fragment of history recorded years afterward in AA Comes of Age. With deep joy, I present to you Father Ed Dowling, who lives at the Jesuit house right here in St. Louis. Father Ed, knowing whence comes his strength, is definitely allergic to praise. Nonetheless, I think that certain facts about him should be put into our record, facts that new generations of AAs ought to hear, read, and know. Father Ed helped to start the first AA group in this town. He was the first clergyman of his faith to note the surprising resemblance between the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius, founder of the Jesuit order, and the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. As a result, he was quick to write in 1940 the first Catholic recommendation of AA which we have any knowledge. Since then, his labor for us has been a prodigy. Not only have his recommendations been heard worldwide, but he has himself worked at AA and for AA. Travels, AA meetings, Weise and Tender Counsel, these works of his can be measured in thousands of miles and thousands of hours. In my entire acquaintance, our Father Ed is the only one from whom I have never heard a resentful word and of whom I have never heard a single criticism. In my own life, he has been a friend, advisor, great example, and the source of more inspiration than I can say. Father Ed is made of the stuff of the saints. A great cheer of welcome greeted Father Ed Dowling as, indifferent to his grievous lameness, he made his way to the lectern. He limped like crazy. Father Dowling of the Jesuit order in St. Louis is intimately known to AAs for thousands of miles and more around. Many in the convention audience remembered with gratitude his ministry to their spiritual needs. St. Louis old-timers recalled how he helped start their group. It had turned out to be largely Protestant, but this fazed him not a bit. Some of us could remember his first piece about us in the Queen's work, the Sodilities magazine. Wow, that would be interesting to find. I've never heard of that, except in this article. I bet they exist. I bet historians have it. He had been the first to note how closely, in principle, AA's 12 steps paralleled a part of the exercises of St. Ignatius, a basic spiritual discipline of the Jesuit order. He had boldly written, in effect, to all alcoholics, and especially to those of his own faith, folks, AA is good. Come and get it. And this they certainly had done. His first written words were the beginning of a wonderfully benign influence in favor of our fellowship, the total of which no one will ever be able to compute. Father Ed's talk to us at the convention that Sunday morning flashed with humor and deep insight. As he spoke, the memory of his first appearance in my own life came back to me as fresh as though it were yesterday. One wintry night in 1940 in AA's old 24th Street Club in New York, I had gone to bed at about 10 o'clock with a severe dose of self-pity and my imaginary ulcer. Lois was out somewhere. Hail and sleet beat on the tin roof over my head. It was a wild night. The club was deserted except for old Tom, the retired fireman, that diamond in the rough lately salvaged from the Rockland Asylum. The front doorbell clanged, and a moment later Tom pushed open my bedroom door. "Some bum," he said, "from St. Louis is down there and wants to see you. "Oh, Lord," I said, "not another one. At this time of night, oh well, bring him up." I heard labor steps up the stairs. Then, balanced precariously on his cane, he came into the room carrying a battered black hat that was shapeless as a cabbage leaf and plastered with sleet. He lowered himself into my solitary chair, and when he opened his overcoat, I saw his clerical collar. He brushed back a shock of white hair and looked at me through the most remarkable pair of eyes I've ever seen. We talked about a lot of things, and my spirit kept on rising, and presently I began to realize that this man radiated a grace that filled the room with a sense of presence. I felt this with great intensity. It was a moving and mysterious experience. In years since, I've seen much of this great friend, and whether I was in joy or in pain, he always brought to me the same sense of grace and the presence of God. My case is no exception. Many who meet Father Ed experience this touch of the eternal. It is no wonder that he was able to fill all of us there in the Kiel Auditorium with his immutable spirit on that wonderful Sunday morning. Everyone then present will remember this famous quote from Father Ed's St. Louis talk. There is a negative approach from agnosticism. This was the approach of Peter the Apostle. Lord, to whom shall we go? I doubt if there is anybody in this hall who really ever sought sobriety. I think we were trying to get away from drunkenness. I don't think we should despise the negative. I have a feeling that if I ever find myself in heaven, it will be from backing away from hell.
Wow.
Interesting.
Wow. I love the picture that it paints of him coming up the stairs and him not knowing who it is. And then there he was, wow.
There's something really classic about that visual.
Yeah, very classic. I can see it in the movie.
Yeah. Out on a stormy night. It was a dark and stormy night, and this man shuffled up the stairs. And as he opened his overcoat, I saw his clerical collar. Right. You could really get some drama out of it.
Right, you could. Oh my goodness sakes! All right,
okay, Monty.
3 great articles, man. Next week, in remembrance of Ebby. Ooh,
Ebby,
that should be great.
Yeah,
I love Ebby.
Ebby was Ebby.
Ebby was Ebby. All right, my friend. Well, good enough. Folks, listen to the very end of the broadcast, and you'll find out how you can catch up on every one of these episodes of Walking Through the Language of the Heart. Until next time, this is the Monty Man along with Chris S., and we are wishing God's perfect serenity for you. For more recovery workshops with Chris S. and the Monty Man, visit our website at take12radio.com and click on the Recovery Workshops banner.
This has been a broadcast of Take 12 Recovery Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.
This has been a Chicken and a Pig production.
Kitty, 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 kitty. Meow, meow, meow.
Woof, woof.